After a week off, the Overwatch League is finally set to return. We've got a 12-game schedule ahead of us for the week with 2 games on Friday, and that Friday schedule system is going to continue onwards for the next couple of weeks. Let's talk about what there is to look forward to after that insane summer showdown we got. And as usual, to start it off, we have to talk about the hero pool. So for this week and the next one for that matter, Orisa, Widow, Mei, and Ana will be unavailable to play. With bans like these on the table, there's a few different possibilities on what we could see. To make a little prediction on what we might see in the meta, I would say that for tanks, we primarily see a lot of like Rein Sigma, Rein D.Va, or maybe Winston D.Va if we see some hardcore dive action. Meanwhile, there should be a fair amount of Genji, Ashe, and Tracer on DPS with maybe a little bit of Echo or maybe Torp thrown into the mix. And lastly, on support, I'm expecting to still see a lot of Baptiste Brigitte because that is probably the strongest support duo in the game right now. But I wouldn't be surprised if teams maybe throw in some Moira Lucio or Zen even if they want to fully invest in the dive comps. Those are my overarching thoughts on the potential meta though, so now let's get into the games. So to start us off on Friday afternoon, the Paris Eternal will be taking on the Vancouver Titans in a little quarterfinals rematch of sorts. While the answer will likely be what we are all thinking, I am curious to see how the Paris Eternal perform fresh off a tournament victory. With them knocking on the door for 5th place, I'm expecting them to go all out. Meanwhile, the Titans are looking to string together a few wins to improve their positioning come playoff time. This game definitely has a sense of urgency for both sides. As for who I favor, I think it goes without saying that I'm liking Paris. They literally just beat their toughest competition in the region 2 weeks ago, so I'd be surprised if they struggled with Vancouver. Not to mention that we are currently in what is probably their strongest meta possible. Sparkle on the Genji plus Ben Best on the Reinhardt is going to cause some problems. The Titans are at a severe disadvantage in that regard. They can't match that kind of Genji play. None of their DPS can play Genji at that high of a level. And that is ultimately why I am predicting the Paris Eternal to win the set in 4 maps. I'll give Vancouver a map just because they proved they could during the summer showdown, but that's all I am willing to give them. The Titans are definitely improving, but this is not a beast they are ready for. The Eternal are in a completely different league, and the meta is not doing them any favors. If I were Vancouver, I'd focus more on their other game later in the week. It's a lot more winnable. Don't waste your energy in a losing battle. Moving on to the other Friday matchup we've got going on, the Battle of Texas Part 3 comes into town. And you already know, I gotta highlight this one as a key match of the week. The Battle of Texas is usually really entertaining to watch. It goes without saying that these two have changed substantially since their previous meeting in the May Melee. Houston are seriously starting to find their groove while Dallas continue to falter. Besides there being a ton of pride on the line and everything with this rivalry, this game feels like it's always high stakes, and this especially goes for Dallas this time around. The Fuel have been losing a good amount as of late. They can't seem to find any answers to their questions, or prayers for that matter. But if they can get the win here, it would be absolutely massive, and I think it could be just what they needed to potentially turn their season around. But this is not going to be a walk in the park. With the way Houston have been performing these last few weeks, the Fuel may be facing an uphill battle potentially. It all is going to depend on how the Fuel feel throughout the week. If they feel confident and sure of themselves during scrims, then I like their chances. But if they show us more of what we saw during the Summer Showdown qualifiers, then they are going to lose. My confidence in this team fluctuates from week to week, but I'm going to believe in the boys in blue here. Dallas wins it 3-2. The reason I prefer the Fuel in this scenario is because of the meta. So far, Hydration has only really looked good on Orisa, and with her being banned now, I have serious questions about his capabilities on Reinhardt and Winston. This especially goes for his Rein. And I don't really have that fear with Guangzhou. He's a dependable Rein and Winston player, so on paper, he's got the advantage over Hydration. But if Hydration proves to be good enough, then this game is a bit more up in the air. Regardless though, I am expecting this game to be close. The rivalry makes these guys play harder every single time. And because Houston have been so confident as of late, I can tell they are going to go down kicking and screaming. Keep an eye on the main tank battle as well as Dante and Meko versus Decay and Note. In my opinion, those are the crucial matchups that decides who wins. Now on to Saturday. Starting it off, there will be an APAC showdown between the Seoul Dynasty and Hangzhou Spark. This one will also be a key match as it greatly intrigues me. Two teams who are kind of in a weird place going head to head. I'm curious to see how this ends up turning out. Like with the last game, the big focus has to be on the tanks. I tend to think that the Spark tanks are in a better position with the current hero pool. Seoul have only really proven themselves with Orisa Sigma this year, so this will serve as a big challenge and potential obstacle for them to overcome. How much the Dynasty can resist the Spark will greatly rest on the shoulders of their tank line. No matter who they end up running, they have to post results. If they don't, then the Dynasty are going to crumble. It's usually tough off for their tanks as it is when the situation is like this, but it doesn't help that this week's hero pool is well tailored towards the Spark tanks. I would argue Gushway's worst shield hero is Orisa, so getting to play more Rein and or Winston will make him feel right at home. While I do think there's a good chance this game ends up being close given how both teams have been struggling as of late, I can safely say I favor the Spark in a 5-map series. I have a lot more trust in their tank line to get the job done right now. Until the Dynasty can prove me wrong in that regard, I will not pick them in this type of scenario. Oh, and as a quick bonus reason to consider watching this game, you'll potentially get to see some Architect versus Prophet Genji, which could definitely be a real treat. A Genji difference of some sort may help decide the outcome of this match. For the second APAC game of the week, the London Spitfire will try their luck against the Summer Showdown champion Guangzhou Charge. With a slight meta change in order, this might be exactly what London needs to pull off an upset. Maybe a slight change will throw the Charge out of their rhythm in some way. Well, at least that's what London fans can hope for here because this is going to be a tough game. The Spitfire may be getting better, but Guangzhou have taken some unreal strides since the middle of June. That DPS combo of theirs has been quite potent. Eileen still has his Genji this week, of course, and even without Widowmaker in the rotation, Happy can definitely still be a threat. So long as the Charge keep playing the way they have been, they should be able to win. And I expect them to keep up this level of play, and that's why I'm giving it to the Charge in 4. But I wouldn't say there's a 0% chance for the Spitfire here. The odds are stacked against them, sure, but if the Charge falter and they can play a complete game, there is definitely a chance. I said it in the Summer Showdown prediction video, and I'm going to say it here. The Charge are overdue for a not-so-good performance. They're on a criminally long winning streak right now, and finally beating the Dragons may result in them taking their foot off the gas a little. If their DPS cool down, or maybe like real struggles off Orisa, let's say, then maybe the Spitfire could pull something off. If you ask me, it's unlikely, but I would still consider this a trap game for the Charge. Moving on to the final APAC game of the week, we've got the NYXL versus the Chengdu Hunters. From the perspective of the Summer Showdown, both teams are coming off some sort of shortcoming. Chengdu can't even look competitive right now, and the NYXL can't seem to beat the top tier teams in the APAC region. What will happen when two frustrated teams collide? Well, if you ask me, there's only one realistic outcome given the skill gap. With how weak the Chengdu Hunters have been this year, the NYXL is clearly the right choice. I will say though, the current hero pool in place will definitely give Chengdu a better chance to be competitive. No double shield means the pace will at least be a little bit faster, and we all know how much Chengdu benefits from chaos, and with no Orisa or Mei on the table, they may be tempted to opt into the Wrecking Ball. In theory, they should be able to feel more at home in this meta. However, that does not mean they will have any sort of advantage. This team has been lost for a fair amount of time now. I have zero faith in their abilities currently, and that won't change until they show me consistent results. I have the NYXL taking the series 3-0. From the pure skill gap standpoint, they should come out ahead in pretty much every way you can think of. But another reason I'm expecting New York to play with authority here is because of what happened after the May Melee. If you can recall, the first match back was a dominant win over the Dynasty 3-0, and I honestly think I see a similar result playing out against Chengdu. New York will come out angry and focused after their tournament shortcomings as they cruise to a victory. With the APAC region games now out of the way, let's focus in on the North American matches taking place on Saturday evening. To start, the ice-cold Gladiators look to bounce back against the Vancouver Titans. I think it's pretty understandable to feel worried about the Glads this weekend. They've kept on showing signs of regression with their terrible inconsistency, and their most recent blunder against Washington really scares me. The cruel reality we have to face is that this team is currently one of the worst in the North American region, and the Titans are only getting better. It's insane to think this is reality, but the Gladiators could realistically lose this game, and it's fair to even consider them underdogs if you want to. The good news for the Gladiators, though, is that there's no Orisa. She has been one of the biggest thorns in their sides this year, so that might help them play better. Running Cloudy on Rein Mirror or maybe OG on the Winston is exactly what they want. So in that regard, I think the Gladiators actually have an advantage. Besides main tank, though, I will be looking at the supports. Big Goose may be having a down year, but he's still better than Karkar in my opinion, and Shaz has been far more consistent than Rolf. On paper, the LA support should play better, but I'm not going to guarantee anything. Brigitte Baptiste is something the Gladiators struggle on, and the Titan support players have shown steady improvement with this combo. Depending on what is played, Karkar and Rolf may be able to hold their own. Part of me is tempted to go with Vancouver, but I'm going to resist that urge and pick the Gladiators to win in 4 maps. As bad as they've been as of late, I for one think a meta reset will breathe some fresh life into them as they find a way to get the dub. Next up will be the Washington Justice versus the Toronto Defiant, two teams who are seemingly on the rise because of Genji going head to head. I have equal interest in both sides here, so I'm marking this down as a key match. Through the power plays of Agilities and Tuba, the Defiant and Justice have discovered a system that truly works for them. Both of them did some things to impress during the Summer Showdown, so we might bear witness to a back and forth affair. There's quite a few places where the two sides actually match up pretty well. In my opinion, the DPS lines kind of cancel each other out, and I tend to think that Arc and Cruise are around the same level, but I can't say the same for tank and support. Kariv I hold in a higher light than Aim God, and Janu is definitely more explosive than NYXL. It all really comes down to main tank to see who has more advantages, and I give this one to Toronto. Roar has yet to show me that he can be reliable on Reinhardt. On Winston, he's definitely fine. I'm not worried there. But his Rein has never really been good in the Overwatch League. Numlocked might not be a million times better than Roar, but I'll definitely take him in the Rein battle. There is a chance that Janu could be a difference maker since he's pretty good with protecting his main tank partners, but I'm not sure if that'll be enough to save Roar from making the mistakes he always has. That concern makes me believe that Toronto Defiant will win the series in 5 maps. No matter what happens, I am expecting to see a good game. But unless Roar proves me wrong or the Justice find a different way to win, I see the Defiant coming out on top. Heading over to the 7 p.m. EST slot, the San Francisco Shock will play the Boston Uprising. So first things first, let me say that my thoughts and prayers go out to Boston. I would not want to be in their shoes this Saturday. Imagine finally getting to play after sitting out the Summer Showdown just to play the Shock in your first game back. And this isn't just any normal Shock team. You are dealing with a red-in-the-face, angry Shock. Those guys hate to lose, especially when it comes against a rival or in any sort of tournament scenario for that matter. Boston may have had extra time to practice and prepare, but they're at a severe disadvantage. The Shock may not be that good at dealing with Genji comps, or playing them for that matter, but it's unlikely that Boston could capitalize on that in my opinion. Color Hex's Genji leaves a lot to be desired, so unless he's improved drastically since the last time I saw him, the Boston Uprising are going to get outclassed. Boston have rapidly declined back to their old selves, so I get the feeling that the Shock are going to win in a clean sweep. They are simply better in every way imaginable, and if history tells us anything, then the Shock will bounce back from a tough loss as they usually do. To wrap up the Saturday matches, the LA Valiant will be playing the Atlanta Reign as both teams look to bounce back after a disappointing Summer Showdown. I'd like to think of this one as a key match for that reason, plus a few others. For one, this is a rematch of that epic reverse sweep we saw way back. And two, I am very curious to see what happens with the Valiant. They were dealing with some internal issues that really hindered their ability to find success during the Summer Showdown, and I am interested to find out if we get a similar version of that team or if they return back to their normal selves after getting a week off. That's ultimately what decides the outcome of this game for me. In my opinion, the Valiant are straight up a better team when they're at full strength, so if they get back on the right track, they win. But if they still show lingering effects from 2 weeks ago, they probably lose. I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes, so I would say it's 50-50 on which version of the Valiant we get. Just to be cautious though, I am going to assume they aren't quite at 100%. So for that reason, I am taking the Atlanta Reign in a 4-map series. It's kind of sad too because the Valiant DPS probably could keep them in this game. Not to mention that this is a meta that's better suited for their tanks. Atlanta are pretty unproven when they can't play Orisa Sigma or Orisa Rein. Under normal circumstances, I would definitely pick the Valiant, but I don't really feel like taking the risk when I don't know the current state of that team. And that concludes Saturday. On to Sunday, where we've got only 3 NA matches to look forward to. The first of which is between the Paris Eternal and Toronto Defiant. Unlike their Canadian counterparts, Toronto may have a slightly better chance of giving us a competitive series here. I only say that because they have a true Genji specialist, and Logix has been pretty hot as of late, as he might be able to push Exi back at certain points in the series, I feel. The problem that Toronto faces though is that they are not as well-rounded or consistent. The Paris tanks, DPS, and supports have proven to be more reliable. Besides maybe like flex support, and even that may be pushing it, Paris have the clear-cut advantage everywhere else. Toronto have to rely on the hot hand with their DPS to find success, and Paris get consistent greatness every game with theirs. You tell me who's in better shape here. The Paris Eternal win 3-1. I'll give Toronto a pity map because why not, but that's all I'm willing to give them. We're talking about a top 5 team in the Overwatch League as well as the Summer Showdown champions here. Paris are honestly just as comfortable in this meta, if not more. Sparkle on Genji, Ben Best on Rein. If he's played, no smite on Winston. It's so good for them. Not to mention that there is a skill gap with many of the head-to-heads. You take Hanbin over NYXL any day of the week. And the same goes for like Sparkle against Agilities, FD God versus Cruise, all of those matchups. I would genuinely be surprised if Paris struggle or end up losing for that matter. That's all I really have to say about that match, so let's move on to Atlanta versus Florida. With the big rivalry aspect behind this match, this will be the final key match of the week. Oh, I've been looking forward to this one. Atlanta have been waiting to get the revenge for ages now. They got denied of that opportunity in the Summer Showdown, so I'm sure the anticipation has hit its peak. Atlanta may not be in the best shape right now, but the same can be said for Florida, who had a really off game against Houston. If there was ever a chance for the Reign to get the revenge, now would be the time to strike while Florida's coming off a loss. But the question is, can they do it? My answer? Well, I'm not too sure. It surely is possible, but it doesn't seem likely to me. This goes back to my thoughts with the Atlanta and Valiant game. Atlanta in a Genji meta with no Orisa Sigma is a big question mark. I don't feel very confident in them with the current hero pool, but I also just think Florida will straight up be better at this. For Ryan comps, they can simply play Korian if needed, not to mention that Chris and Gangnam Jin are simply superior on the bat break compared to Atlanta. The Reign have struggled greatly with this combo, and this especially goes for their break. I'm anticipating the Florida supports and tanks to have a better outing. For that, plus my trust issues with Atlanta, I'm predicting the Mayhem to win in 5 maps. I don't know what it is, even though I really don't trust the Reign here at all. I just have this gut feeling that they will either overachieve in this match or the Mayhem will play down to their competition. In the end though, I have to say sorry Reign fans, because I fear your revenge is going to have to wait for the time being. You'll come close, but in the end it won't be enough, as your team still has some stuff to figure out. And finally, to close out the week, the Valiant take on the Boston Uprising. Again, depending on how the Valiant feel as well as who they play, this could either be a good game or an ugly one. If everything goes their way, things are looking good for them. And even if the Valiant don't play at their best, there's still a chance they can win this. It's not like the Boston Uprising are doing any better than them. In this game, I will be looking at the supports and the DPS and maybe even the off-tank battle. Support is important because we don't really know if the Lastro situation has gotten any better. If Lastro does not play, it is going to be on Apply to play well enough to keep up with Halo. I think that's very important. For the DPS, the Valiant definitely have the edge in that department, so I'll be looking towards Color Hex and Jerry to step up their game. As for McGravy versus Punk, I think this individual matchup is kind of intriguing simply because I rate them both in a similar manner. They're both solid on Diva and Sigma, so if you ask me, one of them needs to go above and beyond to give their team any sort of edge they can. If one of them can play a more complete game than the other, then that might be the difference maker. This game really comes down to which team I trust less right now. I know that sounds silly, but that's how it is. And sadly, that team is the Boston Uprising. The Valiant might be in a weird place internally, but Boston is still Boston. My prediction is that Lastro will play and that the Valiant DPS will pop off big time. Maybe Punk could help turn it back in Boston's favor, but I don't believe he will be enough. And that is why I am taking the Valiant 3-1. I am seriously ready for the Valiant's DPS trio to play a sick and inspiring game. I very much prefer them over Color Hex and Jerry. That glaring disadvantage will lead to Boston's downfall in my opinion. With that said, that is going to conclude my predictions for week 24. So now I turn it over to you. Who do you have winning this week? Tell me down in the comment section. And if you enjoyed the video, it would mean a lot to me if you could hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you're new. And if you wish to further support me, consider following me on Twitter, joining the community Discord, and becoming a channel member. And as always, thanks so much for watching the video. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.